Welcome to Melt University's 2020 summer program. This year, our virtual intern program will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Here's your host, President and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome, students, to today's virtual Melt University Summer 2020 podcast. We've got some amazing guests going on so far, amazing learnings, amazing insight from many industries. And today, I'm very honored to have a very dear friend of mine, an innovator, a pioneer in the sports media industry. You guys are going to want to be sure to tune in and listen to Taylor Bloom. Taylor is part of the new vanguard of sports media in this country. He is CEO and co-founder of SportTechie. And if you're not receiving SportTechie on a daily basis, then after this podcast, please sign up. It is a wealth and wellspring of great information of what's going on in the sports industry, what's going on in the technology within the sports industry, and particularly now in a COVID world and post-COVID. What Taylor was doing was very helpful to everybody in our industry, but it's going to be now important as forever. He has become the definitive global sports technology resource. It gives him a unique access to really the pulse of sports technology and innovation. And as we begin to unpack and discuss new career paths for students coming out of college liberal arts with a sports background, SportTechie is going to be the place to go to connect you for the information, for the thought leaders. He has these amazing conferences. He's having these amazing virtual conferences. But he started just like you, graduate of UCLA with a degree in media and mass communications. Previously worked for Connect TV as a sports content associate producer, was with Fox. But this guy's going to become a really good go-to resource for you. So Taylor, thank you so much for your time and welcome to Virtual Melt University.
Yeah, wow, Vince, thanks so much for that introduction. Happy to be here and chatting with you today.
Well, we really appreciate it, and you know, like I said, I told you early on, this was our dream to really evolve Melt U into a virtual platform. We had this outstanding program every summer, had about 40 students coming in, but we always had this nag or this tug that said, hey, we want to share it outside the walls of our agency. We want to share it outside the walls of the conference room, and so. We've got tremendous guests who all have volunteered their time, but we want to dive right in. And so sort of talk about, and you and I have broken bread together many times and discussed future goals and dreams together, but talk about really what led you early on. Did you always want to be in sports, in communications, in mass media? Talk about your path a little bit, because one of the overarching themes that we're talking to our kids about this summer are the career paths, are following your passion. You're going to encounter some obstacles. You're going to get thrown off the saddle. Life, obviously, particularly now with COVID and everything going on, is not linear. But sort of talk about your early path, which has led you to SportTechie, and then we'll talk a little bit about SportTechie.
Yeah, boy. Early on, I when I started SportTechie with a couple of buddies, it was just this idea to be a blog and, you know, just kind of cover this intersection of tech and sports that we felt was really not being covered and really underserved. And we thought there was some good stories to tell there. And it was as simple as that. I never had ambition to kind of grow it into a business. The real spark of it was I thought it was something that kind of matched one of my goals of my career, which is, it sounds a little corny, but it's just always been something I've told myself, which is zig when others zag. And there's a bunch of ways to interpret that, and, you know, interpret it however you want. But, you know, coming out of school, there's so many people vying for the same jobs in the sports and entertainment world. And, you know, there's just higher demand than there is supply. And I wanted something that was unique to put on my resume and that would help me meet people in the space. And, you know, what better thing was there than to start this blog and interview people that I ultimately wanted to, you know, one day work with them or have their jobs and just learn from them. And I, you know, worked with some a couple of friends and then a bunch of volunteers that we managed to really grow the site and just build it on that simple idea. Like let's talk to interesting people, record that, publish it, and see what comes of it. Unfortunately, I think it hit at the right time. There was just a really great demand organically from people working in the sports industry to read what we were covering, and it all started with me just trying to do something that was a little different that I hadn't seen before, and just try to add a unique bullet point to my resume that could be a good talking point in some of my early interviews.
So sort of step back, how long ago was that? And were some of these former classmates from UCLA when you guys kind of, because obviously if you're in California, that's the hub and the epicenter of Silicon Valley and technology and that intersection. But so sort of step back, and how long ago was that? Because then there's another point I want to make to our kids when we're talking.
Yeah, it's getting longer and longer ago now. It was spring of 2012. I got going with SportTechie, and it was with a couple of buddies I had met through LinkedIn. So it actually wasn't classmates, but it was other people who had similar ideas, similar interests, and we decided to team up. And it was, I think, a really cool experience to team up a couple of people from elsewhere in the country, because at the time I was kind of in my California bubble. Just my network was young and just getting going, so that was a benefit to find some other people who are interested in working in sports and work with them. So that was spring of 2012, and we just attacked it with a great energy for like 3.5 years, just kind of building this blog on the side, talking to more and more people, executives in the space, other successful entrepreneurs in the space. And it was a labor of love for that 3.5 years. And then it got to a point where it just hit this tipping point, and we wanted to go full time, quit our day jobs. I was working at Fox Sports at the time, which was great. Mm-hmm. That's a whole other thread we can go down, Vince. But it got to a point where this blog just kind of took over, and it was really exciting, and we just decided to chase that. So started in 2012, quit the day job in middle of 2015, and then fast forwarding almost 5 years later, we've taken on some rounds of investment and really grown since made the full-time leap.
So you hit on several things I want to talk about the kids today. Is that so? You started this in 2012, mm-hmm. So you really have been grinding for 8 years, and so we all tend to look at society now as instant gratification, or you see a unicorn company hit out of the thousands that don't hit. But you and your buddies and your company and your employees and your fundraising, you've really been grinding at this for nearly a decade now. So talk about that spirit of commitment that when kids get into students get into any job or any path or any career, you got to make that commitment. You got to grind. You got to pursue that passion with zeal. Is that sort of correct?
Yeah, it's hitting the nail on the head. I was really lucky, and sometimes I just get lost in thought of thinking about where my path would have taken me if I hadn't kind of gotten going with SportTechie and really put that energy into it, because mm-hmm. I was fortunate to do exactly what you said, Vince, found a passion and pursued that. I really enjoyed my time at Fox. It was highly educational, but I personally have always had kind of an entrepreneurial itch. And at Fox, it's really great media company. I loved working in their digital office out in LA. It was a great time, but I was a younger person at a much larger company, and mm-hmm. I saw this opportunity to follow something that really energized me and I was really passionate about, and that's what I ended up pursuing. And again, I don't know what I would have done without it. I obviously would have continued to work hard at Fox and try to climb the ladder there, but I'm so thankful that the chips fell this way, and I've just continued to pursue it. And yes, it's a grind when I have a conversation like this, and I'm reminded that it's been 8 years I've been doing this, and I'm reminded of our origin. But it's also because it's the classic cliche. It's the classic, Steve Jobs talking to graduates back in the day, whatever mm-hmm. speech you want to cite. It's the classic thing. If you find something you're passionate about, it doesn't really feel like work, doesn't really feel like a grind. You're thrilled to be grinding, because the alternative is, you could be at a desk job somewhere and, doing that classic corporate climb, which is great. It's perfect for some people, and I'm definitely not bashing that. But for me, I was really happy to be grinding because it was something I was passionate about.
Well, and then so let's keep continuing to unpack that, because early on in this conversation, you said you really started this as a blog.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing we continue to tell our students is, in their generation, the most sophisticated group of consumers, access to amazing technology, information right at their fingertips, they really possess the tools now. If they want to start something, they find a passion, they find that niche. Talk about the tools that they do possess and they should be taking advantage of and be aware of now, as you were just basically starting a blog on something that you liked and knew there was a niche in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the best time in history to be a content creator of any type, and I'm talking like a TikTok channel, channel in Overtime or Wave. We just did a cool story on SportTechie about them today. There's so much content consumption. There's so many channels to produce it for nowadays. Uh, Go niche, go deep. Don't try to just build something for a really large audience to start. Find your empty piece of real estate and just set up shop there and start with a voice and start with the mission to be really specific and be the best content creator in that niche as you possibly can be. And that's all we started off doing. We had this hypothesis that there's this underserved element to the sports industry where we kept seeing these cool tech stories pop up and they would get covered, but there was more to be desired there with the coverage. And we just thought that was some empty real estate that needed to be occupied. And so nowadays, which is crazy because 8 years isn't a long time, but we started a WordPress blog and that was pretty scrappy and fun. And we were pretending to be developers and figure that out. And nowadays you can just do everything from your phone, and there's channels I don't even interact with now that are just popping up every 6 months and taking over the world. Find your voice and pick your favorite platform and just be really consistent with it. That's the other key, is the consistency. Yes, we found a niche, but we were absolutely relentless with the grind of producing the content for that niche, and that is a must. It's like your savings account and compound interest. Just keep committing to it, keep adding to it, and you'll be really pleased with the kind of growth results over time.
Yeah, and you just hit on a big one, because part of what we're talking about all summer is students need to begin recognizing now that they are their brand, and they need to begin the process now of building that brand. And you hit on a big one that we talk about a lot. LinkedIn, to me, in my profession, and we tell our students, is the greatest networking tool in business of all time. So talk about how you leveraged LinkedIn early on, and then talk about how you think kids should be leveraging LinkedIn now, and what are some of the tricks of the trade that you would share with them as it relates to LinkedIn, because we really believe that is the platform to accelerate these kids' job search and success in job search coming out of college.
That's so funny you bring up LinkedIn. I always say, people like, what's the most powerful social media platform out there? What tool? It's just LinkedIn. It might not be the most fun or sexy now with like 15-second fun videos, but it is tried and true. And I've always appreciated people that reach out to me now either looking for jobs or partnerships, and they reach out, they're clearly researched, they know what SportTechie's doing, what I've been doing, what our kind of priorities are. It's a quick, simple message like, hey, can I get 15 minutes on the phone with you at your convenience, and let's just chat. And I'm always happy to have that conversation. And I've always found that most people I reach out to are happy to have that conversation. And you don't get that type of outreach on many other platforms or websites. And I'd agree, Vince, LinkedIn is really a very powerful tool. It should not be overlooked. And you can't have an over-polished LinkedIn profile. There's always more to add. And there's, I think, really great resources there. And my favorite phrase when we were getting going with SportTechie, because so much of it was just cold LinkedIn outreach, like, hey, can we interview you? Do you want to sponsor some of our assets? Do you want to speak at one of our events? So much of that was cold LinkedIn outreach. I would just always use the phrase like, hey, shot in the dark. And shot in the dark was like my internal little message to myself. And I was just fearless, and I would message anyone and everyone, without spamming them. But again, having a targeted, precise outreach and a quick, concise reason to be contacting them and say, hey, shot in the dark, any chance you want to speak at our events, et cetera, et cetera. And people loved it. They appreciate an authentic outreach. They hate the spammy outreach, and people are better nowadays than ever at instantly detecting spam versus authenticity. So those are my bullet points on LinkedIn. I'm glad you brought it up. It's been one of my favorite tools in my career so far.
Well, it's funny you should say shot in the dark, because the first chapter of my book is about taking the shot. And I was a sophomore at Auburn. I was going to be a sports writer. I was in my first journalism class. The head of sports information was a guest lecturer. He talked about the locker room and the press box, and I'm like, man, I want to be over there. And after the class, I walked up to him and said, may I volunteer? And he said, come over this afternoon. So we talk about taking that shot, the shot in the dark. Talk about what gets your impression on LinkedIn, because you just hit on the key word, authenticity. What gets your attention? Talk about the impression. Talk about the effort, because, to your point, we've all gotten very sophisticated at who the spammers are on LinkedIn now. And so if you're showing me or Taylor Bloom, hey, you've done your research on me, you've talked about SportTechie, you're authentic in that approach, but what gets your attention in the LinkedIn process? Because this is big, and we're going to focus on it all summer.
It's absolutely the authentic follow-up. Everyone who gets a message on LinkedIn, which is, multiple daily for a lot of people, you can pique their interest, but they I can say I likely won't respond the first time, because it's almost a test to see if you're just spamming a bunch of people, copying and pasting a message. So it's you follow up 48 hours later, a week later, whatever it is, and your follow-up can be like, hey, Taylor, Vince, friendly nudge, wanted to follow up on this, really passionate about this, or really think this is worth 15 minutes of your time. Keep at it. You can't, really overdo it in terms of proving you're authentic. Now, obviously don't, just go crazy and message them every hour, every day, etc. But make sure you're showing you're a human being and you're interested, because if you are spamming people, you're likely not going to follow up with every one of them. And that's the first kind of screening test I do for emails and LinkedIn.
Well, you talk about tests, because I talk to our students about it a lot, is that I sort of purposely put those Easter eggs in there a little bit, because I want to see what type of teammate or employee or person that they're going to be. So, I don't want to give them like the low hanging fruit. I want to see like, hey, show me what you got. Show me a little bit of grit in that process. So it's interesting that you say that. So at what point do they is the tipping point, do they tilt you to the edge that, the founder of SportTechie will respond back? Because not so long ago, and I say that about myself, but it was a long time ago, but you and I were in that same position on the other side now. So talk about that a little bit more, because this authenticity is a big hook for our kids to listen to.
Yeah. When I say authenticity, that means spending some time, researching the person you're reaching out to, having a hook. Maybe they recently gave a presentation somewhere that's public, or they went on a Twitter rant with someone, or they posted a blog post. Check those out, reference them in your outreach, and show that you're putting thought into your outreach, because that means it's going to exponentially increase your chances to show the person you're contacting that, yeah, it could be worth 15 minutes with him or her on the phone, just to kind of see what's there. They're clearly passionate and professional and buttoned up. That's always been one of the biggest items for me. Just kind of seeing that they put in some time and some thought. Absolutely. And also, full disclosure, we are still building SportTechie. I'm a first-time entrepreneur. I try to surround myself with smart people, and I have found that many other people feel that way as well. So there is also a sense of people do appreciate an outreach, a well-timed, authentic outreach. There's a part of networking too. I'm always happy to interact with a really eager, passionate student, or someone just looking for a job out of school. That could be one of our next hires. So there is also value in your outreach to me that you shouldn't necessarily overlook. It's not a total one-way street where you're just desperate to get on someone's calendar. So have some confidence too when you do make that outreach, and have confidence in your ask, saying, look, 15 minutes will be worth your time. Here's what I want to discuss, etc. And that I don't remember when I started thinking that way, but it certainly took a few years, and that I found was important to look at as well.
So you represent what I think the future of sports business media and sports, and obviously the intersection of technology. Where do you see the future of this going, and where do you see for our students? Where are these careers? Where are these career paths? What should they be studying in school right now, knowing that technology is truly going to influence the on the field player the experience, the game experience, the fan experience, how you consume it in a second screen environment in the home. Where do you see this going, and what are the future careers for our kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. From the careers perspective specifically, just in one word, it's data. Whether it's on the athlete performance side and the amount of data that is being measured and tracked from the actual movement of all athletes to the data around fans and their ingress egress patterns and the strategies teams have for those fans coming to their games. The jobs are where you can be on a business intelligence or business strategy team for a team or a league or a brand here, and helping break down these new patterns that are emerging in the sports business. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of this has been obviously facilitated by new technologies, whether it's new sensor technologies again on the athlete performance side, or fan engagement on the digital side, or new venue designs. That's where the jobs are, in my opinion. It's being really, really good with at the most basic level Excel. We actually hosted a pretty cool conference last week in partnership with the 49ers. It's called Horizon Summit, and the 49ers
Mm-hmm.
have the largest business strategy and analytics team for any NFL team. I think it's like close to 15 full timers, I believe.
Wow.
And they hosted an Excel boot camp, and they're the foundation of that really large team is their ability to manipulate data, run reports, run forecasting, and understand how all these different factors play into their uh, the success of their franchise. And actually, that team is even more valuable nowadays in the COVID era we live in, because there's so much change going on with these business models, and that team on the business strategy and analytics side is being relied on more and more. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are where the jobs are. Is just uh, I don't know what title exactly you put on it in terms of like what you exactly study, but it's on the data science side, the business strategy side, and any way you can help pull insights from the mountains of data that are being collected nowadays. That's where you'll be a really important hire for an organization.
Well, yeah, yeah, and that's a perfect segue. Talk about your vision of how you believe the fan experience is going to be in these venues in a post-COVID world. And what we talk about a lot, and what I talk about a lot in a lot of things in my articles, is that there's a giant gap in expectation between going to Levi's Stadium for the 49ers and the Rose Bowl from a fan experience and
Mm-hmm.
sophistication. I'm just using those. I use it Mercedes-Benz Stadium and Auburn University, over here. So talk about that experience, and then how does that intersect with our expectations and where there may be some career opportunities in that as well.
That's a good question. I'd say to bring up the examples you just brought up, Vince, like between the Rose Bowl, which I went to plenty of games there, being a Bruin, and then also Levi's, which I've been to a number of games at as well. Levi's is just so fluid and smooth. You walk in, you connect to Wi-Fi right away. You can order anything to anywhere you're at in the stadium. It's very just simple to have the experience you want.
Mm-hmm.
Get the food, see what lines are longest, etc. You're in, you're out. It's quick. The Rose Bowl, maybe that's not the best example. It's you're driving onto a golf course in Pasadena,
Right, right.
terrible traffic, and it's just a cement bucket. And I think it's gotten better in the last few years, but like the signal's challenging both because of
Mm-hmm.
geography and the actual age of the venue, and it's much more of a kind of a destination. Also because it's a college football stadium that's well off campus, So it's just a different vibe for, I think, going to a game there. But
Mm-hmm.
we're definitely moving in the Levi Stadium direction, to use those two examples. Everything's going to be fluid. You're going to show up, a few minutes late to the game, maybe leave a few minutes early. Everything's going to be baked into the city, like the Chase Center that the Warriors just built in San Francisco. That's
Mm-hmm.
the future. Everything's just part of a seamless night out. Parking will be much easier, and it's just all going to be much more fluid, and contactless is a major part of it as well, both literally from a physical perspective and then also from a digital perspective.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be, for a while, much less fans in the stands, and I we still have a lot of learning to do for this year and where all that is going to go, and how that impacts ticket prices, etc. But it's going to be easier than ever to get into and out of games and stadiums and have a good time, and not have it be a massive investment of your time. And so again, the job opportunities there, to go back to your question, Vince, are with helping on the strategy side, and transforming those existing strategies, and how do we upgrade the experience of the Rose Bowl so you're not stuck in 45 minutes of traffic before you even get to the freeway, which are then a nightmare in LA. And how do you adjust those dimensions and make it a much more fluid experience? And it comes down to the tracking the data of, on the ticket side, the merchandise side, the ingress egress side, etc. So I think I'm a broken record on the data side, but that's everything we're seeing in our coverage at SportTechie with where the jobs are.
Well, you just, and I've experienced that at the Rose Bowl more than once, and kind of oddly, it diminishes your experience of being in that hallowed ground when you leave, because it takes you about 17 hours to get out of there. And by the way, I think the colleges overall are going to have, and you're seeing these upgrades happen.
Yeah.
They just can't happen fast enough. And now you got the ADs, athletic departments, under financial duress. And so there's a lot of, but what we're saying is there's a lot of opportunity there, particularly in the pro venue and the college venue environments. Talk about your vision. We know that this generation of consumers is the most sophisticated consumer there is. We know there's a lot of cord cutting. My son's a 20-year-old sophomore at the University of Georgia, and he laughs that I still have a cable television subscription. Where do you see that heading? Will it continue to happen, the cord cutting? And where will those opportunities be for kids within the mobile and wireless environment as it relates to fan and content of sports consumption?
Yeah, I think you said the key word, which is content. To this point in this talk, Vince, I've been kind of a broken record and saying, like, follow the data to get the jobs. But on the content side, invest time in video editing skills and graphic skills. There is going to be, in my opinion, a dramatic increase in the unique. It'll seem unique at first, but let's call it the new types of content that teams are creating to engage their fans, and it will be further and further away from the actual game itself that's played in between the lines or on the court. And there's going to be a real demand for more content to be created, because I think less fans will go to games in the short term, and then in the long term, there's just going to be kind of a desire and a goal by teams to create more of a fluid, cohesive environment of fanhood. Whether you're at the game or on your couch, it's going to be a really great experience no matter what. And what we've talked about today, yeah, you have high definition television, you have Twitter, whatever. Those are kind of like 5-10-year-old technologies, and the couch experience is okay. But there's apps coming out now where you yell into your phone, and then the phone takes that audio and pipes it into the stadium, so you have a
right.
Like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That is going to be happening a lot. So there's great jobs in terms of producing content there. That bridges the gap between being a fan on your couch, being a fan in the stands, and just being an overall supporter of your team. So get really creative with content creation. Continue to understand all these new platforms that are coming out, and teams are really looking to be nimble with their content, their distribution rights. And I think there's just going to be an explosion of creativity and inspiration in that sector over the next few years.
Well, and you talk about content, so let's shift gears just a little bit. And I think it's very long overdue, but do you see a lot of career opportunities with the college athletes being able to use their name, image, and likeness, which I think is way overdue. I welcome it. I think it's going to be tremendous for both the athletes, but a lot of students on campus might be in the position to help these kids because of their possession of the tools, the access and proximity to the relationships. But I think it's sort of a game changer in a lot of fields for a lot of us. What's your read on that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. That's something I'm still really learning about and observing. You obviously might be much closer to that than I am on the college level. I think it'll be great for the elite college athletes who can really start to build a brand and make some money. Obviously, the Zions are once in a generation, and then there's a handful right below him on a kind of a second tier that will do great because they can now build a brand and monetize themselves. But I think, to your point, there'll be a lot of opportunity for the second, third, fourth, fifth tiers of athletes who may not have a name, but they can start to, going back to what we were talking about, maybe create some really original content and start to surface themselves in ways they just never could have before and start to monetize that. And that will demand some really great creativity. And I can see that being a tremendous area of opportunity for a lot of college students who may not be athletes, but want to work with the athletes to make a name for themselves, get great experience in building brands and building audiences and crafting content strategies. So that's definitely an interesting area. And I'm glad you brought that up because I do agree that will be just an area that's ripe with opportunity for forever going forward. And I think that's a really exciting thing.
So as we wrap up today, couple of softballs for you, or maybe they're not softballs, but who, since you've been doing this since 2012, who's the best, most innovative executive from a technology perspective in sports that you've worked with so far, or encountered, or interviewed, and that we should be turning our students on to today? Talk about some of those experiences.
Oh man.
I told you it might not be a softball.
No, in no way is that a softball, Vince. There's so many. I love it. There's so many good ones. We definitely have some that we've worked closer with. I think Zach would be cool with this, but the person that honestly comes to mind is Zach Leonsis with Monumental Sports Entertainment. The group that owns the Wizards and Capitals in DC and a number of other teams in the area there. He has always impressed me because of his last name. His father was a very successful businessman, and he could really sit back and rest on his last name. But he obviously he has not. I think he's young 30s, if that, and he's always seemed wise beyond his years in my interactions with him, and very progressive. And he kind of has always stood out to me as one of the up and coming real leaders in the sports industry. And overall, my experience with Monumental Sports Entertainment, their whole organization kind of reflects that. And I think it starts with kind of Zach setting the tone. Obviously, his dad owns the organization, but he is a great heir apparent and is someone, if you have the opportunity to at all spend some time with him or even just observe what he does. He speaks at conferences regularly, so you can check out a lot of his talks. I would encourage students out there to give him some time and check him out. I think he's a really wise person to follow, and he's a hard worker, and it's saying something because, like I said, he does not have to be a hard worker with his last name and his family, but he absolutely is. And he's the person that comes to mind with your question, Vince.
Well, and I don't know Zach, but I follow him a lot. I follow the innovation that Monumental is doing. Maybe you can help us get him on here, because I'm a big fan. And obviously, what we want to do is connect our students to the Taylor Blooms of the world, connect our students to the Zach Leones of the world, and turn them on, because coming out of this, this post-COVID world and all the madness that's going on, we're trying to help our kids get to the top 5% of that consideration set for that job. So, guys, if you're not a subscriber to SportTechie, after you finish this podcast, I strongly encourage you to follow Taylor. Reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's right where you were. He's right where you are, and he and I are still. We're all in the rejection business as well. As I like to say, what do you do for a living? We're in the rejection business. But Taylor's a good friend. He's going to be continue to be a leader, a pioneer, a voice in the industry. It is one of my go-to reads every day, not only with the conferences and the podcast and the articles and the interviews and the perspectives and the access that he has. I really, really feel like that he's going to be a valuable tool and resource to you. So Taylor Bloom, CEO, co-founder of SportTechie, tremendous pioneer leader in the industry, great friend of Melt, great friend of mine, great friend of Melt University. Taylor, thank you for joining Virtual Melt University 2020, Summer 2020, and we're really, really honored that you were part of our program today.
Always good chat with you, Vince. Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.